here because of the issues that our nation is facing. So with all of the recent developments across our country and in our very own communities, it is with great pleasure and great expectation that I call forth the members of this next panel. Legislator Sheila Bynot, who is the legislator of the 2nd District, a former trustee of the Westbury School Board. Matthew Latimer, the conciliation specialist from the Department of Justice, Customer Relations Services. We have Assistant District Attorney Dana Boylan, head of the CODA program, which one of our panelists talked about earlier, the Council of Thought and Action, a community-based program that helps ex-offenders re-enter society, and we heard such a powerful testimony how it saved the life of one of our young men. We have our Hempstead Police Chief, Michael McGowan, and Reverend Linwood Dean, pastor of Judea United Baptist Church in Heaven, helping end violence now, and Pastor Kirk Lyons, Brothers Keepers Ministry, boots on the ground. Will they come at this time? So as the panelists take their seat, and as we move forward in this conversation and in this discussion, this is the last panel, but certainly not the least of the issues that face our community. Black and Brown Lives Matter is an issue that is being discussed throughout the nation. And so we are so thankful that we've had the different voices that have come forth. We heard from our students, we've heard from our educators, and now we are going to hear from those who are in the legal and the spiritual community. I come before you having worn many different hats, but out of all the hats that I have worn, perhaps the two most important hats as it relates to today's conversation, Black and Brown Lives Matter, is the hat of having raised 5 children in the Hempstead Village School District, Hempstead Village community, having lived in this community, having raised them in this community, having served this community on the legal end, but now even more importantly as we seek answers, is serving this community on the spiritual level. So I give thanks for having served and continuing to serve at the Congregational Church of South Hempstead with my pastor Patrick Dugan and with the other members of the clergy. So thank you for agreeing to sit on this panel today. I have a list of many, many different questions that are being posed by the community. I don't think that there's any of us present that have not turned on the news, and we have many different opinions about the incidents that have taken place. Most recently, the death of several of our brothers. Many of us are here today, and voices are being lifted up because we have concerns about the life lost in Cleveland, Tamir Rice. We have concerns, and the community and the world looked at Ferguson, Missouri, and our hearts went out to Michael Brown and his family, regardless of whatever opinions we have about how those incidents occurred. And then right here in our own backyard, our eyes and our hearts were focused on Staten Island with the case of Eric Garner. And how many of us remember the smile of Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida. There is a long roll call, and there are many different opinions about what we believe happened in those specific incidents, many different opinions about what we believe should have happened in response to those incidents. But we are here today in response to the President's initiative at the direction and invitation of our mayor, because A, we all agree that Black and Brown lives matter, and B, in spite of the fact that I'm wearing this t-shirt today that says, I can't breathe, we are here because we are all breathing. Amen? So with that being the case, as I turn to the panelists, we are aware from the program about your current respective positions. And so we applaud those positions that each one of our distinguished panelists have. We have 2 pastors on the panel, and so we understand in spiritual language what it's like to be called to the positions that we have. So the first question that I have as we frame the discussion this afternoon is separate, apart, and above the position that you now hold. What do you believe you are being called to do in this time, in this age, and in this place in response to the events that are unfolding all around us? And I'll start with Pastor D.
Do you want to do that? And my response to that is the fact that as it relates to black and brown lives doesn't matter. And above and beyond that, my call is the fact that as a human being, all of our lives should matter. And we should speak and that comes with a level of respect across the board in terms of as humans, respecting and caring and protecting one another. And knowing that as we protect one another, we're doing a service that is divine mandate, really. And so so it is important that we do that as human beings. And I think that's the most important thing. We are all human. It doesn't matter what color you are, the hue of your skin. It is the fact that we are human. And every life should matter. And all of us should be able to breathe. And no one should take the opportunity to take another person's life, irregardless or irrespective of what position you hold or what authority you might be. It is important that we protect one another and care for one another.
I believe that my position is to be a voice that calls the culture in total into accountability. You said above and beyond. I was an educator. So I talk to educators. I'm on the street in the middle of the night with youth. I work with law enforcement. I was a musician for over 20 years. So I talk to recording artists about being responsible regarding the compositions and the videos that they do. Everywhere that I have reach, I think it's important to be a voice that calls them into accountability. Where I live, I pastor an entire white congregation that has never heard the gospel preached in the manner that I'm used to preaching it. But they've also never heard particular concerns expressed within that house of worship in the way that I do it. I pastor the chief of police where I live. He stays in my office. I hold him accountable for what he does.
So greetings to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I know a number of the panelists very well, some I don't. But to the question of my responsibility and my position, I'm not ashamed to say that I believe in a higher power, and I believe in my position that I have a responsibility to pass along to the members of the police department an understanding of human compassion. And we work at that constantly. We work at training. We work at brotherhood. We believe in the community. And as the discussion goes on, I'll explain how we accomplish that. But I think first and foremost, my responsibility is I'm the leader, and I expect that the people that work for me would follow my example.
I'm a peacemaker. My primary function with the U.S. Department of Justice Community Relations Service is as a mediator. And also as a son of a minister. One of the things growing up that I always heard my mother tell me was to leave things better than I found them. And in the role that I currently serve, a big part of what I do is trying to improve communication between the folks that are involved in conflict. And really, I think that's my life mission. You know, coming into this role really, I would say is where God would have me to be.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, yes, you already know what our credentials are and the various entities that we work for. And in my role, as an assistant district attorney, before working in the capacity that I currently work in, I've always envisioned it as a role that allows me to advocate for those who are unable to advocate for themselves. And one might say, well, that's kind of difficult because, you know, you work as a prosecutor. And the reality is, in any role that you hold, you have opportunities to do the right thing. You have opportunities to educate. You have opportunities to support. And I believe that's my role as an individual, over and above, separate and apart from any titles that we hold. As the Director of Community Reentry Initiatives and Youth Programming for the office, that's exactly what I do. We try to educate within the community, educate outside of the community, support our community members with their needs, and use whatever access you have and networking you have as leverage for those community members who are most in need of the support.
Good afternoon. I believe that God has chosen me in a time such as this to be able to bring a call of action to rally individuals to come together. Just recently, after my election, we had an incident in Westbury involving one of our young citizens, Kyle Howell, and it was my charge, I believe, to bring the community together and to rally with the family for the case to be thoroughly investigated and adjudicated. I believe that it's also my role to ensure that legislation is developed and moved forward to support the accountability and the safety of our community, to protect our civil rights. I also believe that in my role, I'm charged with working with the administration at the county to ensure that the ethics and the accountability structure of the police department is as such that individuals who take the oath to serve and protect do so, and when they don't, that they are dealt with expediently and properly. I also believe that in my role that I am charged with bringing the community together along with the police department and the administration to ensure that, you know, the concerns of the community are identified, that there is a corrective action, you know, plan in place, and that we work together to bring those things to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I look out across the audience, there are some very familiar faces. There are some faces who I've never seen before, but know this, that each and every one of us are major stakeholders. And so while you may not be sitting on the panel, as we prepare to leave this place, but not the presence of the overall community, we ought to be asking ourselves, how have I been called? And that question needs to be answered above and beyond whatever position or whatever activity you've been engaged in to date. As I reflect upon that question and I stand before you in my own particular call, and as I look at the panelists today, I realize that we must be multi-dimensional. I've said this in church more than once as I lift up the fact where my heart and my political persuasion and my spirit is so much in alignment with those who are protesting, those mothers who have lost their sons. I am also the mother of 3 sons, 2 of whom are in law enforcement, 1 of whom serves in the Hempstead Village Police Department. And I have to tell you that my primary prayer every single morning is that my sons come home at night. That my sons, those who are sworn to protect, who wear a badge and a uniform and have a gun, that they use discretion, that they take with them everything that we poured into them, that they use some sensibility and some sensitivity to the people in the community, but I want them to come home at night. So let me just say that at the outset. I also have my youngest son who doesn't wear a uniform, who does not have a gun, who does not have a badge, and who chooses to wear his pants sagging lower than I would want them to sag, and wearing his hair in ways in which I prefer that he not wear it. But I also understand as I look around our room that we didn't always, even the panelists today, we did not always look the way our parents wanted us to look. We did not always say the things our parents wanted us to say, or act in the ways that our parents wanted us to act. So as we engage in this conversation, we don't have enough time to get the views and the talking points from each panelist about how they feel about the incidents that have occurred. We do know that they have occurred. We do know, as the poets began this session, that change is happening in our country. We do know that we are gathered here as a call to action. So given that, black, brown people, white, red, yellow people, we now have our spiritual guns pointed at the police department. And we have some concerns about how the police departments and police officers have interacted with our community. We also know, as we look at this panel, that there is a space and we have a need for black and brown faces on the bench, in the police department, in the district attorney's office, as defense attorneys, and on the streets. But since we have our chief of police here, one who I have worked very closely with during my tenure as one of the judges in the village of Hempstead, I'm going to go straight to the heart of many of the questions that are being raised, and perhaps some of the answers that we may begin to unpack right here in our community. So Chief, I ask you, can you speak to the role of community policing in light of the various issues that are before us in the nation, and the role specifically that the Hempstead Police Department and other places are engaging in order to deter, to minimize crime, and even the ways in which the initial interaction between a police officer and those who are on the streets take place?
Absolutely. Community policing has always had a fond place in my heart. About 8 years ago actually, I became the commanding officer of the community policing unit. Our village community policing unit consists presently of a sergeant and 8 police officers. And their responsibilities are multifaceted. They actually work closely in conjunction with our Juvenile Aid Bureau. And if I could say this now, with budgetary cuts, there are a number of departments that have abolished their Juvenile Aid Bureau, their juvenile detectives. And that was a consideration for us a few years ago, but I declined to take that step, basically because I felt the need for our Juvenile Aid Bureau to be closely connected with the school district, with the youth of the community, and they stay closely connected with our community policing unit. So they're more or less a satellite to the quote-unquote community policing unit. And the community policing unit is not our first connection to the community, because really the people that take our phone calls are the first connection, and we work at that all the time, at their sensitivity or lack thereof, but we work at that constantly. The community policing unit, they're a direct connection to the chief of police, and they always have been. So when I have issues, either sensitive or issues that are very much connected to the community, that's where I go. I call the sergeant from community policing, tell them, here's the issue, it's a community issue. It may not be a crime, it may be a quality of life issue, it may be a racial issue in the schools, and they connect with the Juvenile Aid Bureau, and they're the police department's first line of defense to community unrest.
So Chief, there's no question that there's some good cops and bad cops.
No question.
And there's no question that police officers have discretion when they approach a situation.
Huge discretion.
So knowing and recognizing that there are good cops and bad cops, and that cops generally, when they're in front of you, they present one face, right? And when they're out in the community, oftentimes it's another face. How can we combat or how do we address effectively the bad cop syndrome above and beyond the programs that are in place, which all sound great, and I know the benefits of community policing, but how do we deal with that cop who has some other issues, racial or otherwise?
It's a good question, and I think that the administration, the mayor and his board, and the community would have to trust that they have the right chief in place, and that the chief has put the right person or people in place to deal with discipline within the department. I'm 100% confident in my deputy chief, who's in charge of all internal affairs complaints that come to the department. He's very fair-minded, he's very strict, and I'm 100% confident that we're right in line with handling all complaints that come in from the community. And the ones that we can't handle, that the deputy chief, it goes beyond his scope, that perhaps they're criminal, we take those complaints from my partnership with the DA's office. I'm connected to a bureau chief, and we bring those complaints to the district attorney's office, and they get investigated there.
Thank you. So Reverend Lyons, you have lifted up the many different ways in which you have been called. Clearly, in your current capacity, you serve as a pastor. But I happen to know that you have a very successful program, Boots on the Ground. Could you talk about Boots on the Ground and some of the other activities in which you have connected the dots with people from different communities with different backgrounds outside of the pulpit?
Absolutely. First, I just want to piggyback on what the chief just said. Smartphones have been bad cops' worst nightmare. District attorneys have been bad cops' best friend, and that's a problem. That's a structural problem. Boots on the Ground is a ministry, even though we've been categorized as a middle-aged activist group. We are the ministry. We spend our Friday nights going into some of the more troubled areas of Nassau County after midnight, engaging in the young men that we find in the street. One of the first things that we do in every area is we do talk to the commanding officer, to the chief. We give them our literature, let them know what we've done in other places, how the crime rates have gone down. Sometimes they have had communication amongst themselves. And then we go into those areas, we talk to the churches that are located in those areas, because quite frankly, we like to have some place to send these young men to. And we go out in the middle of the night and we pray with them. And over a period of months, our time with them morphs from just praying with them to actually counseling them. We have literally taken young men into rehab groups. We have helped some get into school. We have helped some get into the vocational programs. We have taken some in the middle of the night to detox programs. We have done marriage counseling for a lot of them. And then when those that don't listen to what we have to say in the street end up incarcerated, we go into the prison system to visit them.
So thank you. Thank you. So you've addressed the underlying questions that it's not just good cops, bad cops, but there's good kids, bad kids out on the street. And what I've heard both of you respond to is how do we respond and how do we engage when there is good and when there is bad and the programs in place. So we have some local issues, and that's part of what we've looked at. I know with the United Church of Christ, where I serve, the leader of the United Church of Christ, Reverend Black, said that before he went into Ferguson, he didn't just arrive in Ferguson, despite of how passionate he was about what was happening, but that he spoke to the local pastors, the local leaders, those who were in place before arriving. So today we have the benefit of having Matthew Latimer, who serves for the Department of Justice, and perhaps, you know, sometimes what's going on the ground somewhat differs from what's being said or felt or seen on a higher level. Could you speak about how to connect the local issues with some of the national issues and the greater issues with the Department of Justice?
Well, currently the Department of Justice is on the ground. And there are a number of different things that are going on. One thing that I would say, sure. One thing that I would say is what was shown on the media is somewhat different than what was on the ground. And I want to just say, in terms of the pastors that were out in Ferguson. There are a lot of good things that were going on while I was there that were not shown on television. And I think those are examples of what we need to do when there is a situation like that, is to get folks from the community, especially community leaders, our clergy, those folks out into the community to deal with these incidents. As I said, there's still a whole bunch of things that are being unpacked in terms of on the federal level. So I won't speak to those exactly. I just will say though, the community response that happened there is what we need to see across the country. Really, folks taking the situation into hand and really providing that attention that it needs. With really the connections that we talked about earlier this morning, and the connections that are happening between the youth, between the community leaders, between police, between all the folks that make up the community.
So, thank you. And I've been a diehard defense attorney for more than 38 years now, and I know that in our community, that there's been a long-standing stigma attached to the prosecutor's office, and I didn't really understand what it was like to walk in those shoes until I became the first female special prosecutor in the village of Hempstead. And then you begin to hear and really pay attention to what the police officer is saying on the other side. And that's not always a good place to be in relationship to the community. But could you speak to us, ADA Boylan? Could you talk about a very special program that's in place in the prosecutor's office, and talk about what your experience is once an arrest has been made, it's in the system, and it's the people of the state of New York versus that person who is accused? What is your relationship to the prosecutor's office, and through what lens do you look at the cases that come before you?
So, I've had the opportunity to look through several lenses. First, probably for the first 6 years in the office as your classic prosecutor.
Mike.
And sorry. So I've had the opportunity to view cases through a couple of different lenses in the office, working for Nassau County. And I will say, firstly, that I think all of my colleagues that I work with try to do the right thing. I am not experienced any colleague that has worked with the police to ensure that justice is not served. I've had a number of opportunities to see situations where things were questionable and our office at the higher level made the right decision in how they're going to handle it. So that does happen, and it happens more often than people realize or want to give credit for. In terms of my current role at the Nassau County DA's office, it's unique because I now have the opportunity to work more closely with the community to address community concerns. What that kind of looks like is as follows. We have, for instance, a number of young men here, a couple of them you heard from earlier today. Those young men were in the criminal justice system. You might say that they're currently still engaged somewhat because they have pending cases. And they've been afforded the opportunity to get a second chance. Not a gift, not a let me forget the fact that you are accountable. They're held accountable in several different ways, including in making the decision that they're going to turn over a new page. And those opportunities were afforded by a prosecutor's office. And so I'm kind of proud of the work the Nassau County DA's office has been doing in the area of community reentry and community support and youth development. I'm not quite sure if any of you have had an opportunity to speak to any of those young men, but when they get a second chance, and I see a number of them in this room, they get a second chance, it's conditioned on things like you've got to go back to school. You've got to take your education to another level, whether it's college or get your GED. You've got to be employed. You have to refrain from future contact with the criminal justice system if you can help it. And the outcomes are very, very, very positive and very encouraging.
Well, I'm excited and I'm encouraged by those outcomes, and it's a wonderful program. But the reality is that not every black and brown male has a second chance. Not every black and brown male has gone through a program, an exemplary program, like the one that's currently in existence. Would you agree?
I would agree that that not everybody is afforded the opportunity, and frankly, I don't think that it is possible to afford everyone the opportunity. However, there are other ways that we can make sure that black and brown lives do matter, and we can talk about those things. So over and above, or in addition to those guys that are here that are have received an alternative to incarceration sentence, you have a number of CODA members here that can speak to what CODA does for someone who's exited the criminal justice system, or for someone who's at risk of entering the criminal justice system. We do gang outreach, and we partner with a number of agencies to ensure that that happens. And why do we do that? Because black and brown lives do matter. And when our youth are killing each other, what message are we sending with respect to black and brown lives? So we do gang outreach to ensure that we engage those young men in a conversation rather than simply reacting to a shooting or reacting through the arrest and prosecution process. We are enhancing that by engaging them in a conversation about why they should value their own lives and the lives of their next door neighbors and their friends. Why gang activity and gun possessions and use of gun is not indicative of the fact that we respect and appreciate black and brown lives. You heard a young man, I think he's in the front right here, talk about going to a university. We took 23 gang members out of the community, and CODA members, not only gang members, out of the community, and engaged them in an experience, experiencing the college, what the college is like, to Fordham University. We're doing our part. We're more than doing our part.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that enlightenment. We're not always conscious of the kind of programs that exist, particularly those that are sponsored by the district attorney's office. And there is a lot of national concern. There's a lot of local concern in terms of what's viewed as, what is known as the blue wall of silence, the kind of relationships between prosecutors and the police department. And we're seeing a lot of that played out, particularly in the Eric Garner case. We are privileged today to have a legislator sitting on some of those issues that are coming before you and how you view it through a legislator's lens in terms of our collective call to action.
Sure. Well, once we do the call to action, there needs to be steps that follow that, right? So I believe that what happened with Kyle Howell really started the conversation and the dialogue at Nassau County, and my colleagues and I came together and collectively, approached the administration, had discussions about how we could move forward in managing, allegations of police brutality. And in that case, we approved by special resolution on the floor a contract with a consultative service that will come in and look at all of the ethics policies and training policies that are in place for our law enforcement agency. So what we did there, in fact, is we're going to look at the training. We're going to look at how we recruit, how we train, how we employ policies, procedures, and there was going to be a whole host of recommendations that will come from the consultant. And as a legislator, I will hold that consultant accountable to make sure that they in fact are hearing from the community, that they're not just working only with the police department, but that they'll also go out into the community and hold focus groups and questionnaires and look at it from legislative district through legislative district, because what's important in my legislative district may not necessarily be important in a legislative district in Syosset or Woodbury. So I personally met with that consultant upon the signing of that contract, and then I met with them again in October just to get an idea of where they were in the process and how they were looking to move forward and what they had uncovered to that point. Aside from that, we put together legislation that would require that officers wear body cams and that there would be dash cams in the cars. We know that alone dash cams and body cams don't work, so that's why solely, right? That was proven, and the video was available in the Eric Gardner's case, right? But we didn't get a conviction there, or not even a conviction, sorry, we didn't get an indictment. So we know that we have to have that other prong in play, which is working within the culture of the police department. Aside from that, I took the initiative to bring the police officers into the community and to create opportunities for the community and the police department to interact. So in a particular, I could use an example, we had a backpack initiative, right? So the kids were going back to school, and so we wanted to make sure that it was successful. They had all the resources that they would need to be able to engage in the classroom. So the various police organizations within Nassau County came together and put the resources together. And so we brought all of those items to the community center. And at that point, we had community leaders, from civic leaders to spiritual leaders to educational leaders to block captains, sororities, fraternities. They all came together and they worked side by side with the police department to pack those bags. And while it was, to many it may have looked like, a menial task, there were really great dialogues that took place in that room. So, from a legislative perspective, I believe that not only should I be looking at legislation, I should also be working and requiring the administration to hear from me and to address the needs and advocate for my community. But I also must, engage the community to ensure that the police and the community are creating their own synergy, and that there's partnerships and linkages that happen from there.
Fantastic. And I'm going to ask one last question of Reverend Dean. The other panels, we didn't have a lot of time for questions, but I believe that you're here. We have a lot of questions. So since we have such a wonderful array of panelists with some exceptional experiences and programs in place that we may not know about, I want to turn it over to you so that you can raise some of the questions that might be burning in your heart. But Reverend Dean, you have been a pastor in the community for a significant amount of time, probably more years than I know, as the pastor of Judea United Baptist, right across the street from the middle school. And you have been working closely with Heaven, helping end violence now. We know Reverend Mackey has been at the forefront of that initiative. What do you have to say in terms of how the spiritual community is engaged and how you specifically through Heaven have been working to end violence?
Well, I think the spiritual community has been really involved in the community. As it relates to Heaven, the organization that I'm a part of, I'm the director of the Hempstead cluster, and we have partnership with many other groups and organizations to bring about a change. And we are gang violence prevention, help end, the acronym Help End Violence Now. That's Heaven. And we come together, we engaged in the community in many different levels. Certainly mentoring is one of those parts of our organization. And then we have families in crisis. We have anger, anger management because we don't want to manage anger, we want to remove anger. And so we meet on that level and we work as it relates to that. So there's several things that we engage with other organizations such as ABBA, food pantries and other things that we engage with. So from the spiritual community, we are involved, and I think that many times we don't get the credit because they ask the question, where's the church? Well, the churches are involved, and many times the criticism that the church is not involved comes from people that don't go to church. Criticize the church, and the church is involved in many levels, and we're concerned, and we are working diligently to work with young men and young women in crisis and in many education. In our meetings every week, we have all levels. We have police force, police officers involved. We have elected officials. We have the educators. We have clergy, and so we are working across the lines, the clergy, and working across the lines to make sure that we do our part in the community and make the community aware that we are there to serve and to educate and to do all that we can to make a difference. And I think that's vitally important. We experienced right here in this room today these wonderful young men that has been able to articulate and express themselves and want us to know that they're concerned and they want to be productive, and they want the education and a safe environment. So a whole host of things is really happening, and we're just excited to be a part of it. There's a lot of work to be done. We certainly want to thank God for the presidents. We are our brother's keeper, and it just didn't start with the president. That's been ongoing as I go back and articulate as it relates to humanity. We are our brother's keeper, and we must do a better job in not just saying it, but acting on being our brother's keeper, respecting one another, loving one another, caring for one another. And it all, listen, why are we having this conversation? Why are we having this conversation today? Because we have failed in many different levels and areas. In particular, let's just talk about it. Let's be honest. If we're going to be honest, the home has failed our children. The education system have failed our children. And if we're going to be honest, churches have failed. And we have to do a better job. We have to come together. And it's not going to work until we come together as a community, as humanity. We have to come together and stop allowing color to make a difference, and just be a human being and be respectful across the spectrum and across the board. And we just don't respect one another, and that's causing a lot of problems. And our children see how we react as adults. Children are imitators. They imitate what they see, and they're imitating us. And so we have to do, as parents, as community leaders, police officers, elected officials, all of us have to do a better job in demonstrating that we love, respect, and care for one another. That's what's going to make a difference in our community going forward. And then black and brown, white, every life matters, because we are human beings and we are representing a God that has created all of us. And that's what is important.
Thank you. I think the earlier panels, and I don't know about you, but some of the programs I was personally familiar with, others now looking at it through this lens and through our gathering. I'm excited, Mayor, that we have so many things in place. We also have heard, obviously, from the previous panel and the panel before, that there are issues and we're not succeeding in all the areas, but certainly we have some resources in hand. I want to open up the floor. If anybody has some pressing questions, that sister jumped up in the back. She looks like she's going to knock somebody down. Ask your question, please.
Hi. So we've had this lovely forum. What's next? Okay, how do we start moving from talking to action? And where are the committees gonna meet? What is the outline? I'm very concerned about our children being consumers as opposed to producers. So I know that my Brother's Keepers had partnered with another technology organization to create a hackathon last month in November in Philadelphia. We need to bring a hackathon to our community, start teaching our children how to code computer languages so that they can go from being consumers of technology to producers of technology. Where's the committee meeting? I'd like to be on that committee.
I want to take the opportunity to recognize all of the efforts of Max Smith, who has worked so closely with the mayor to put this forum together. I'm going to ask that you just hold that question. We're going to end with prayer, and I'm sure the mayor has heard a whole lot, and I don't know how he wants to handle it in terms of what is next or how he wants to present it. But we're going to hold that question, and that's a question I believe that we all want to leave with some, not all the final answers, because we are evolving and we are here because we're all stakeholders. So it's not just saying, what's the police department doing? What's the mayor doing? What's the DA's office doing? It's what a collective, what are we doing? Yes?
Pastor Rockford is sitting here. He had a team of people come and train us for the boss movement, B period, O period, S period, S period movement. The city of Las Vegas has it going on right now where the president is involved in it. And we don't have to recreate the wheel. There's no need of doing that. But I will say that, honestly, they talked about CODA. That's a program that we have involved. I'm going to say to Ms. Bonet, I was a part of the lawsuit against Nassau County in regards to what the police department did. They gave the blacks a different test than the whites. How come we didn't hear about the synergy of being involved with the police department in regards to this? Why weren't we aware that aware of this consultant you had going on?
Okay.
I would love to have been a part of that, especially those that were involved in the lawsuit.
Okay, so the ethic consultant that's in place, it's ongoing, okay? We only approved it at the legislature in May, and they had we talked about data earlier, right? So there's a lot of data that needed to be collected. So they had to spend a considerable amount of time looking at certain data, and they're at the stage now where there's going to be community involvement. When I met with them in October, they were looking at how they were going to do that. And it was at that meeting that I impressed upon them the importance of looking at it from legislative district to legislative district, so that there will be opportunities for community to be a part of the focus group. So that hasn't happened yet. We're not at that point yet. So when that happens, there will be an opportunity for the legislators to be able to communicate that effectively to you.
So I hear two things happening. I hear two questions and two statements being made. One is that there are other programs taking place in other locations and other initiatives that we need to kind of collaborate what others are doing so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. And secondly, that as these programs evolve, that we need to find a mechanism by which the greater community is informed about it. Thank you, my brother. Yes.
I have a question. I noticed that, and I will address this to Pastor Dean. I noticed that what we are trying to do, and I appreciate what the mayor is doing in the village of Hempstead, bringing village people together to talk about the issues that impact the village of Hempstead. But I noticed lately that we have, and I'm going to use this phrase, you can word it down if you want, we have parasites that don't live in the village of Hempstead, who presume to be the leaders in the village of Hempstead, that are attacking the leaders in the village of Hempstead. For example, last night we had several people, all residents of the village of Hempstead, talking about healing And I noticed that people have taken to the internet to attack the leaders that are in the village of Hempstead. And these people have, if they are so concerned about the village of Hempstead, why are they leaving the village of Hempstead, then attacking it, or they don't live here? What are we doing to address the issue that we have people that don't live in the village of Hempstead that are attacking the leaders that we selected to live in our village? What are we doing to deal with those people?
Okay, I'm going to take the privilege of just responding to that question, okay? I don't know that as we come together in response to a call to action, that our energy should be really consumed by those who are not here, the naysayers. I believe that as we seek to collectively respond to a call to action, you're going to always have some forces, whether they live in the village or not, who may agree or disagree. Even as we look across the room, some of us came here today with some very strong feelings about how we feel about one another, how we feel about whoever, whatsoever, wheresoever. If we, in fact, are going to respond to a call to action, then my prescription, my suggestion is that we really concentrate on, as the sister indicated, where are the committees, where is the action, how are we doing it, what are the models that are working? Because we can spend a lot of time unpacking who said what, who's the leader, who's not the leader. This is not about a they and we, it's about a us.
But shouldn't it still come from the village of Hempstead? It still should come from the village of Hempstead because we are the taxpayers in Hempstead. And we ought to be the ones that have to say so, not people coming in from the outside. That's just my humble opinion.
Okay.
May I?
Thank you.
May I?
Yes.
Yes. I want to say thank you, Pastor, for moderating this, and I want to thank you, panelists, for being up there and brave enough to take these questions and answer these questions. I have a statement and I have a question for the chief. My statement is that, Reverend Dean, you hit it right on the point. The biggest problem we have, or what I feel is the major cause of just hostility in the world, is lack of respect. Lack of respect for authority, lack of respect for gender, lack of respect for language, just a lack of respect that we have for one another. And we see it all the time when our young people are engaged with the police. But I'm just a little concerned that we have our young men and women overseas who have to make those split-second decisions as to decide if they're going to take this person as an enemy, take them down, or whatever. Now, let's just say they take the shot. Split second, you got to make this decision. And they kill a civilian. That person that's serving in the armed services, they go to Leavenworth. But a black boy can be shot in Chicago, a black man can be strangled, and nothing happens. How am I to perceive this? So, Chief, my question is to you. You saw what happened in Staten Island. There were 5 officers around this man. What's the protocol? What are the procedures that should have happened where this man should not have lost his life? Let's say this happened in Hempstead. What would your officers do in that situation? What are you teaching them, or just explain it? Because I can't understand how 5 men are around one person, and this person had to die? Help me, Chief.
I appreciate that you singled out the word respect that Pastor Deans had mentioned earlier. I caught on to that myself. I'm a huge believer in respecting, my fellow human beings. In regard to your question about procedure, so I'm sure that you're referring to what's been called the chokehold. We have a policy and procedure that specifically rules that out as a course of action in our department. So it's in writing, it's part of our training, that we're not to use that particular hold. If that's what took place in Staten Island, it won't happen here. at least as regards to training and policy and procedure. But as long as I'm talking about training, I'm very proud of our training process here in the village of Hempstead. As part of our contract, our officers are mandated to give us 3 days of training per year. And what we do with the training is we do 1 day of firearms training, which we combine with use of force training. So every year our officers are trained and retrained in firearms and use of force policy, and we're very strict about the continuum of force. So force can be on different levels. Force can be verbal, force can be touch, force can be baton, mace, and last resort shooting. So we have a great trainer. We have a full-time training unit. Lieutenant Pat Cook is probably the most educated and highly regarded trainer in the Northeast. He's actually a graduate of the FBI Academy. I rely on him in discussions of use of force. I'm very confident that our use of force policy is a good policy and a strict policy. We have a reporting procedure about the use of force. So, for example, if somebody were to use what used to be called mace, but now has a different term, a report needs to be used. If somebody were to use their baton on somebody, a report is required. So each use of force that we use is investigated to the fullest. So that's where we stand on the use of force. And the choke hold is, by rule and regulation, not allowed here in this department.
Do you perceive, there are some who don't believe that in fact was a chokehold, based on what you've seen in a vacuum, based on what the videotape showed. Did it appear to you to be a chokehold?
So here's my stance on that question. I don't live in a vacuum. I'm the chief of the police of Hempstead Police Department, and I need to backtrack a moment, please. 3 years I'm the chief. We've arrested approximately 150 people with guns in their possession. It's 150. We've made approximately 4,500 arrests. So those are interactions with the public where we're taking people into custody as physical force. Of the 150 gun arrests, we've been involved in firing our weapons twice. One incident involved a white police officer who had to shoot at an African-American male who actually shot our police officer. And the second incident was an African-American police officer who shot an African-American who pointed a gun at him. So those are our 2 incidents. So the other 148 incidents and the other 4,500 arrests involve a tremendous amount of restraint in the use of force by the Hempstead Police Department. So we have a history and a tradition, and it will continue, of restraint when it comes to the use of force.
Can I just ask another question? And there's a question that many of us, many across the nation, as they looked at the videotape, and we know that there's always other factors involved, but the tape with respect to Eric Garner and the circumstances as they unfolded, very different in some ways from Ferguson and the incident there. But in this instance, it seemed to be a quality of life, as the media portrays it. Someone who was selling loose cigarettes, and there was a fight, and there's some issue as to how that report came in and what the police officers were responding to. But could you shed some light on the difference? You talked about 150 cases in which the defendant or the perpetrator had a gun. That's one issue. How do those kinds of arrests and actions differ from quality of life crime? Someone standing at the bodega selling loose cigarettes or stopping a fight. Is there a difference in the way police officers should approach an incident where seemingly there isn't a gun or someone's just, outraged, as Mr. Garner appeared to be?
Right, so that's a good question. And I'll revert back to your earlier question about community policing. Those types of quality of life issues, my administration, we usually refer them to the community policing unit to deal with. but not always. The patrol force needs to deal with that. The difficulty occurs as situations escalate. So a quality of life issue on the street, which should just maybe be a ticket or a simple arrest, can escalate into physical contact, physical aggression. They become very, very difficult situations to deal with.
Thank you.
Another
jump up. Okay.
But I just wanted to interject and just to piggyback off of what the young lady said in the back. My name is Sadiqa Condrich, and I'm representing a company that wants to help the community. I'm representing as an entrepreneur and a philanthropist, and just to answer as a solution for what we've come here to do, we want to come together as businesses to help to collaborate with the community, whether it be with the law enforcement, with the public officials, to create community outreach programs for the youth to interact and do fundraisings to collaborate and do more for their own community so it's self-sustaining. So for example, just like the young man that was on the panel for Syracuse University, I put out an event for 16-year-old young girls, 16 to 18-year-olds, to come to Syracuse University for free to learn how to code and develop their technology skills so that they can pursue careers in IT. That's one solution.
Thank you. My sister, let me just wait. Do you have a question?
No, the point
Okay.
is I wanted to say that.
I want, and I appreciate that. This is what I'm going to suggest in the interest of time. You see Matt Smith in the back?
Yeah, we're gonna.
Okay. The voices are heard, my sister.
My question is to the chief. In reference to, I heard you speak about training, in reference to the good/bad cops, how often do they get counseling? Because they are on a job that they have to bring into that job with so much internal problems. So how often does these good/bad cops get counseling?
Is there a counseling component when it's not indicated?
We have peer counseling for people that have issues that are maybe, say, an anger management issue. But when it comes to bad cops, we could call it counseling, but when we talk about it in terms of discipline. So if we have an incident where an officer has stepped outside the boundaries of the rules and regulations, it's counseling, but it's discipline. So we deal with it on that level. I'm not quite sure I'm clear on your question.
If I may say that you said, I think 3 times for the year, there's certain trainings.
Training.
Yes.
How many times for that year does these police officers take away good cops, bad cops, guest counseling?
So
sure.
Does the training include counseling as well?
Sure. We actually just last year did a cultural awareness training. So it was a full-day program. Aside from the 3 days, we added another day of component to it, and we brought in an expert from Nassau County to come and talk about cultural diversity, minority affairs with the officers, and we've done that in the past. So the topics that we discuss in training are varied. We discuss people with disabilities. We discuss the homeless. We have courses that are aimed at the less fortunate. So it's not just use of force that we discuss. We discuss a wide variety of issues in training.
So diversity, cultural diversity is important. I think that there's what the most recent events have raised, and I believe that at the heart of the question is, how do we get to address the psychological, emotional issues of the officers on the street? My brother.
Yes, as an advocate against gun violence, I'd like to know when does mace or a stun gun or any other type of non-killing thing come about, being that every life matters. I don't think that, it should be shoot or kill regardless of what the incident is.
So what is the question?
When do they use this? The mace or the stun gun?
Okay, when do they use alternatives to the firearm?
Well, when officers meet resistance or they meet aggression, they respond to that with a progression of force. So the progression may be verbal, it may be push, it may be some type of a judo hold. It may then escalate into the use of, let's call it mace, because that's what everybody knows it as. And then it may also progress into the use of a striking instrument to back somebody away from them. And that's our progression of force, basically. And we've been very good at it because we've only fired our weapon at people twice in 3 years. And both of those incidents were, that was an immediate response to people pulling out guns and pointing them at the police.
Thank you. So our time, we're going to have an opportunity as we gather in the greater hall to interact with one another. Our time is running out. I'm going to call the mayor forth, but as he comes forward, I'm going to ask each panelist if you would just state for the record, since we're being taped, and in the community of witnesses, in the cloud of witnesses, what is the one thing that you're taking with you as we prepare to leave this space and continue to respond to our call to action? And I'll start with our legislative minority.
One of the things that was talked about earlier, not necessarily by this panel, were the issues regarding mental health. And I really have found that we lack the proper resources and support initiatives when it comes to mental health. A lot of our young people are self-medicating and you know, engaging in maybe violent activity due to some mental health issues. So we've been treating symptoms instead of getting to the root cause. So one of the things I'm going to walk away from here today is to further my commitment in making sure that we look at how we deal with mental health here in Nassau County. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, in leaving here today and actually listening to the conversation and more importantly, the questions that are being asked, I'm very encouraged that the work we're doing specific to our CODA initiative is absolutely needed. I'm very encouraged that it is impactful. And as we seek to expand beyond Hempstead into other areas like Long Beach and Westbury, I'm really encouraged that it will take root there as well. You know, the one thing, we haven't had a chance to really talk fully about everything that CODA is and does, and it's not necessary to do so, but what I do want to say is CODA really embodies the principle of it takes a village. And our CODA members give back to the community in a very real way. They are the village when people come through our doors for assistance, when moms come through the doors because their sons are in crisis, when moms come through the doors because their sons are incarcerated. CODA members are the ones that reach out to those parents and try to help and support them at those times. And we are, the DA's office is a facilitator of that engagement. So I'm really, really proud, and we are going to continue to do the work. Thank you.
A few things that I take from today, and I have to thank you for the invitation to be on this panel. Thank the mayor.
I hear you.
Just want to thank the mayor for holding this program. There were a number of great things that I heard discussed during the day. A couple things, partnerships. Partnerships need to happen between schools, between community organizations, between law enforcement. We have to improve communication. The thing that I take away from this panel, and I know there were a number of questions on the continuum of force and how officers respond to different situations. There needs to be an understanding of what police do. There's community needs to know the police need to know the community. And I think those conversations need to continue to happen in order to improve relations and prevent other incidents, such as the incidents that have happened this past year, from happening.
Thank you.
So I'm taking away from today and last night, encouragement regarding the turnout for people from the village, my village residents, my fellow village residents. So it's encouraging to have these many people and these many voices. And if I could just make a comment on two things that were brought up in dealing with the mental health world. That's part of our training on a yearly basis, how to deal with people with mental disabilities. And as of now, approximately 40% of our patrol force has been certified in crisis intervention. And that's a week-long training program, nationally certified, and we're working towards getting 100% of our people trained. We're just applying for grant money to get it done, but we're currently the only agency in our area that has that many people trained in that. And if I could then make a comment about our officers in the community and people understanding what the officers do and how to interact. Our community policing unit and our juvenile unit have been in the schools for some time, way before Ferguson occurred, doing training programs on bullying and also specifically on how to react when you come into contact with the police. And they're so successful at it that we receive requests from other jurisdictions. And I accept those requests, and I've sent people as far away as Brooklyn to do those kinds of training, because even though I'm the Village of Hempstead chief, I see the bigger picture. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
I'm about to walk away extremely frustrated and disappointed. I think that we have failed to recognize just how systemic the attack and devaluation on Black life is. And when we fail to do that, we tend to appease ourselves and get satisfied with patting ourselves on the back at opportunities like this to talk about the issue without devising a systemic plan to attack it just as vigorously as Black life is being attacked. Think about how pervasive this is when you can have a young man that grows up and he sees movies that are supposed to depict history and they're depicting them wrong. His people have been erased from that. The same young man sees movies that are supposed to be futuristic or fantasy, and even in the fantasy of Hollywood, his people are erased. This same young man goes to school, and when he goes to school, he does not adequately learn about his culture. This same young man opens his Bible in his living room, and he sees illustrations and pictures of people of lands that don't look like his people, when in fact, in actuality, they did look like his people. This same young man, when he encounters some police officers, he is dealt with without giving the benefit of the doubt. And in the justice system that does the exact same thing. When we don't vigorously attack those things, we'll be here year after year after year talking about the same things, and nothing will have gotten changed.
Let me quickly ditto that, but let me also say that I leave here quite encouraged in this regard. The fact that I see the fact that I need to leave here today, and what I leave here with today is I need to leave the pulpit, encourage the parishioners to leave the pew, and let's come out into the street and start interacting more with the community that we are served and that we are part of, and make a difference. And every one of us can make a difference, and we need to take responsibility and take charge of our responsibility and get out here and interact. I'm encouraged because when you see these young men that stood here today and articulated so wonderfully and so beautifully, it says there's promise in our community, and that's what I'm leaving here with. And so we can cultivate that and make a difference, and mentoring them and the things of that nature. That's what I take away from here today. Now I'm really encouraged, but we must take charge and we must be the leaders. Again, let me repeat myself. The children, young people are imitators, and let's give them something to imitate by our ways, actions, and expressing the love and joy that is necessary to move our community forward. I agree, my brother. There's a lot of work to be done. but we can do it better together.
Thank you. So we've heard the voices, we've heard the joys, we've heard the concerns, we've heard the hope, and we've heard the frustration. But we certainly hear and feel your heartbeat, and so prayerfully we will leave here different from the way in which we came in, whichever way we came in, having heard a spark of something that moves us to move beyond just sitting here and occupying the space. This was and is a call to action, and so we are thankful for those who coordinated. This is the springboard for conversation, many different voices from different places, different perspectives. But the one thing we know is that this room alone is worth trillions of dollars, because we have a lot of gifts, we have a lot of talents, we have a lot of opinions, we have a lot of forces, we have a lot of resources, we have all that we need to make a difference. And so with that being said, we thank the Mayor of Hempstead, all those who worked and collaborated to bring it together, each one of the panelists, and we ask that he come forward with his closing remarks. Thank you.
Wow. This is what I can say. I think that all of you should give yourself a round of applause. I believe that this is the first time. I've been in Hempstead for going on 37 years, and came from Queens, and I think this is the first time I can remember, and Donald's been here longer than me, and a lot of you too, but Donald, this is the first time we have all the stakeholders, the police department, the educators here in the village coming together and trying to come up with a solution to make our village a better place. Am I right?
You're right. It's an excellent summit, and the next step will be even more important.
Right, and this is not a one-shot summit. And Reverend Lyons, I hear what you're saying, that if we don't attack those things that you brought up, but this is the first step. The first step was to bring us all together so we can just, brainstorm. And Max has been doing a great job. Max, as I said earlier, I was talking to Max after 11 last night. She's still at work, so Max, wow, this is a great turnout. And we are going to follow up on these things. And I want to ask those that did not sign in that there's a email address that you can send your name and phone numbers, and that's to msmith@thevillageofhempstead.ny.gov. Max Smith is right there in the back. And Max, raise your hand so they can all see who you are.
Right, and Mayor, in January, we're also going to try to put a link on the website that's titled My Brother's Keeper, so people can click on that link and find out what's going on, and also email us the form there so we can get your input.
Yeah, and also we want to thank the Recreation Department for setting this up for us. They did a good job. Juanita and her staff also did a great job for us too, volunteering out there. BB, our worker, thank you, BB. I want to thank the Board of Trustees for their support, supporting me and Max and standing behind us for this. Thank you guys, I really appreciate it. Just a couple of things that I just want to say at the end here. With the police department, we are putting things together with the police department. We've had a clergy come to the roll call. We also have 2 trustees that meet with the police department on a weekly basis on Wednesdays. They go over to the Armory and meet with the police and talk issues, what concerns residents here. And I spoke to the chief about getting body cameras for our police officers, and he's going to research that, and hopefully by the middle of next year that we will have that. Some of the things that with the school district, I don't think it was about I or whatever. This was, experiences that people had, and they were just bringing it out. But one thing I do want to say about the school district, for so long, I've been thinking about the kids coming from the Heights, and walking over to the high school. I'm thinking they need a bus. I really believe they need a bus. So somehow we got to put our heads together and make that happen. We did have the school board here, 2 members from the board and the superintendent. And the other thing that I just don't understand with the school district is a school's been closed for over 10 years. We have not replaced that school. Other districts got 3, 4, 5 other new schools. Why? We got to think about that. We got to work together with the school and talk to our folks up there in Albany and see that we need to get a new school here in Hempstead. And I think that we work on that. So Max is going to put everything together. We're going to follow up on this. But before I go and say and ask Bishop Gates to come up, I want to recognize my wife here because I want to go home tonight. She's here with us also. So I don't know if the trustees want to say any last thing. Any of the trustees? Bishop?
Again, we thank everybody for coming out, and it's important that you understand, as the mayor said, this is not just the first time that we're going to come together. And it's good to hear different people's best practices that might work. But we're going to have a follow-up meeting with our stakeholders and some of the people that were on the panel. So now that we've talked about it, we can devise a plan to do something about it. And for so long, all we do is talk. But the mayor has decided that we're going to come together and we will come up with a plan, and so that we can see the difference in the village of Hempstead. Thank you so much. And those of you that want to be a part of that task force, that part of the stakeholders, you can hit that link on our website, the Village of Hempstead website, and be a part of it. So again, we don't want anyone to feel that this was just a meeting to come together and talk. It was almost like a think tank that we came together, talked about best practices, and we'll follow up and come up with a plan. Thank you.
As was mentioned, it was a wonderful opportunity to see these groups come together and discuss. It is a black and brown, and I don't see many brown, but I think we need to kind of bring that message that's brought out, but we have to enforce it a little bit more so we can come together as one unit. There is a force when we come together, a greater force as one together, black and brown. So hopefully